All right, let's take a deep dive into the world of kimchi.
Ooh, kimchi sounds delicious.
It is pretty tasty, and, you've been researching it, I've been researching it, and we've been seeing a lot about the potential health benefits,
Right.
but also some concerns.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to try to unpack all of that today. We're going to be looking at 3 YouTube videos that you picked out. One from the Fung Bros.
Yes.
One from the History of Cuisine.
Love that channel.
And then one from nutritionfacts.org.
Okay, so we've got kind of the cultural perspective.
Yeah.
And then the scientific one.
All right. So hopefully we can kind of make sense of all this conflicting information out there about kimchi.
Sounds good to me. Let's do it.
Okay, so first of all, kimchi, it seems to be having a moment, right?
It really does. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. You see it in all kinds of fusion dishes, like kimchi tacos, kimchi fried rice.
Kimchi quesadillas?
Kimchi quesadillas, yeah. Have you gotten a chance to try it?
I have. I'm a fan. Actually, big fan.
What do you like about it?
I love those complex flavors, and I think it adds a nice tangy kick to, pretty much anything.
Yeah.
But, I think a lot of the interest comes from those potential health impacts.
Right, and that's what the Fung Bros, they were really excited about in
Right.
their video. And, they mentioned that there was a study about a particular type of kimchi called kakdugi
Okay.
and how it's potentially linked to reducing abdominal obesity.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great, right? Who doesn't want a little less abdominal obesity?
Right, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's really important to remember that the study just showed a correlation, right?
Okay.
So it showed that people who ate more kakdugi, they tended to have less abdominal obesity.
Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was the kimchi that caused that.
Right.
It's kind of like the example they gave, that just because people who eat kimchi might also have smaller eyes, that doesn't mean that kimchi is shrinking their eyes.
Right, I see. So there could be other factors involved.
Yeah, there could be all sorts of other things going on there.
So it's not like a direct...
Not necessarily a cause and effect.
Okay, so we need more evidence before we can definitively say.
Exactly. We need to do a little more digging.
Yeah.
And it's always good to consider who is actually conducting the research.
Okay. Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah, so in this case, it was the World Institute of Kimchi.
Okay.
So, they definitely have an interest in promoting the benefits.
Yeah, of course.
Which, again, doesn't invalidate the study, but it's something to keep in mind.
Right, so it's like, take it with a grain of salt.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this potential upside, but then there's also the concern about kimchi and stomach cancer.
Right, which is kind of a scary thought.
Right, yeah. So what did you find interesting about that aspect of the research?
I think the thing that I found most interesting was the comparison that the Fung Bros made
Yeah.
about Japan. So they were saying that Japan has very low rates of most cancers, but their stomach cancer rate is one of the highest in the world.
Wow, okay, that is interesting.
And that really made me think, what's going on there?
Yeah, and the nutritionfacts.org video, they went into a lot more detail about that.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's this bacteria called H. pylori that might be a big part of this whole story.
Right. Yeah, that seems to be kind of a key player here.
And so, from what I understand, it infects the stomach lining.
Right.
It can lead to chronic inflammation, which
Right.
could then potentially develop into cancer.
Exactly.
So, both Korea and Japan, where kimchi is a staple, they have some of the highest rates of this H. pylori infection.
Yeah, that's right.
And stomach cancer.
Right. But it's not that simple,
Okay.
right? Because there are some African countries that actually have higher rates of H. pylori infection,
Okay.
but much lower stomach cancer rates.
Interesting. Okay.
So clearly there's something else going on.
Yeah, it's not just that bacteria.
Right.
So what else is going on?
Well, it seems like the high consumption of preserved and salted foods
Okay.
might be playing a role.
So not just kimchi, but also like...
People, vegetables, fish, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so it's not just kimchi. That's
Mm.
kind of the common thread.
Exactly.
In the History of Cuisine video, they really emphasized how kimchi has been this dietary staple in Korea for centuries.
Right, yeah.
And I was wondering, if it was that dangerous, wouldn't there be like widespread stomach issues in Korea?
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah.
But it seems like the key factor might be the amount that people are consuming.
Okay.
Right. So they were saying that in Korea, people are eating like 5 to 8 times more of these salt-fermented vegetables than in Japan.
Wow. Okay, so moderation is key.
Right. Moderation seems to be very important here.
Yeah.
Especially given the potential impact on the stomach lining.
Mm.
And speaking of impact, we have to talk about the elephant in the room here.
The salt.
The sodium.
The sodium, right, and the Fung Bros.
Yeah.
that they brought this up, how kimchi can be really salty.
Merle.
Yeah. Especially when it's combined with a lot of other traditional Korean dishes.
And a lot of those traditional dishes are pretty salty, too.
Exactly. So they were worried about that.
Yeah.
But I thought salt was mostly a concern for blood pressure, not stomach cancer.
That's right. Salt itself isn't a carcinogen,
Okay.
but it can act as what they call a facilitator.
Okay, so how does that work?
So it's kind of like, think of it as sandpaper that's roughing up the lining of your stomach.
Ouch. Okay.
Right, it's not very pleasant.
No.
But that kind of damage, especially when you have that H. pylori bacteria present,
Yeah.
it creates a much more vulnerable environment.
Okay.
And it might even help carcinogens from other sources to get into your stomach lining more easily.
Oh, okay. So it's like weakening the defenses.
Exactly. It's weakening your defenses, and it may even help promote the formation of these cancer-causing compounds.
So the salt is kind of setting the stage
Exactly.
for potential problems.
Right, and when you combine that high sodium intake with the H. pylori infection,
Yeah.
it could really increase that risk.
So it seems like we've got, on one hand, kimchi could be beneficial, but there's also these risks.
It's definitely a mixed bag.
Yeah, and then we've got the salt to think about. It's a lot, I have to say.
It's a lot to unpack.
It's a lot to unpack. So where do we go from here?
Well, don't worry, we're not saying you have to completely give up kimchi.
Okay.
But I think the key takeaway here is that moderation and balance are really important. The Fung Bros had some good advice. They were saying limit it to maybe a couple of servings a day at most.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I also love their grandma rule.
The grandma rule, yeah.
If your grandma wouldn't recognize it, it's probably not the best choice.
Right. Probably not the healthiest.
So I think focusing on whole, unprocessed foods, like those your grandma might have cooked,
Yeah.
that's generally a good guideline.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah.
So it sounds like if you're enjoying kimchi in moderation as part of a balanced diet, with lots of fruits and vegetables, it can still be a healthy choice.
Absolutely. And I think it's all about paying attention to how you feel after eating it.
Yeah, how does your body respond?
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a good reminder. It's not just about following rules, but it's about listening to your body.
Exactly.
And the Fung Bros, they were big on what they called intellectual honesty.
Oh, yeah.
Which I love.
Right. So it's not just about, accepting or rejecting information, but it's about really thinking critically.
Yeah.
Forming your own conclusions based on all the evidence.
So let's recap what we've learned so far about kimchi. I mean, it could have some benefits in terms of potentially helping with obesity.
Possibly.
But then there's this concern about stomach cancer, especially with high consumption and the added factor of the salt.
Right. It's complicated.
It's complicated. It's a complex picture.
Yeah, there's no easy answer.
No easy answers.
Yeah.
We've gone from ancient culinary traditions to cutting-edge science in just a few minutes here.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how much there is to learn about just this one food.
It's more than just a tasty side dish.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave you with a question to ponder.
Right.
We've been talking a lot about kimchi's fermentation process
Yeah.
as a potential contributor to stomach problems. But what about other fermented foods that are often recommended for gut health?
That is a great question.
Things like sauerkraut, yogurt, kombucha, all those things.
Right. All those fermented favorites.
Yeah, so if kimchi could potentially be problematic,
Yeah.
should we be rethinking our love for all these other fermented foods?
It's definitely something to consider. I mean, while fermentation, it does create these beneficial bacteria like probiotics, which can be good for our gut.
Right.
It's also possible that certain types of fermentation or just consuming huge amounts of these foods could actually have some unintended consequences.
Okay, so it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all.
Not necessarily, no.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll dive into that question a little bit deeper.
Sounds good. It really highlights how much we still don't know about the human microbiome.
Yeah, there's so much to learn. So it sounds like even when it comes to these foods that, we think of as healthy, we still need to be informed and just be mindful. Pay attention to our bodies.
Absolutely. I think, really pay attention to how your body's reacting to different types of fermented foods, different amounts, and don't be afraid to kind of adjust based on your own experience.
It's all about that personalized approach, which is what we try to do here, right?
Exactly. We're giving you the information so you can make those decisions for yourself.
Okay, so I think looking back at everything we've talked about,
Yeah.
it seems like there's no easy answer when it comes to kimchi.
There really isn't. It's not a simple yes or no.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah, you got to look at the potential benefits, be aware of the risks, and then also think about your own individual health needs and preferences.
Okay, so this has been a really fascinating deep dive.
It has been.
We've gone from, the history of kimchi to the science of it all, and it's so complex.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder that we should approach all foods with a sense of curiosity and critical thinking.
Yeah.
Don't just accept claims at face value. Really dig deeper.
Yeah.
Ask questions and then come to your own conclusions.
And that's what I love about what we've been able to do here today in this deep dive. We've looked at those studies, we've tried to unpack the science, and, gone beyond just those simple headlines.
Yeah, all those little nuances.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's been, I don't know, it's been a fun journey.
It has. It's been a pleasure kind of exploring all these complexities with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, knowledge is power when it comes to making healthy choices. And I hope this has empowered you to really navigate the world of kimchi.
Yeah.
And make those choices confidently.
And maybe even inspire some curiosity about other foods and how they impact your health.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. So on that note of lifelong learning,
yes,
I think it's time to wrap up our kimchi deep dive.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. So I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into this unique Korean staple.
Yeah, I'm sure you have a lot to think about in terms of your own kimchi consumption habits.
Yeah.
But remember, there's no right or wrong answer. It's about finding what works for you. Listen to your body and make informed choices.
Beautifully said. So until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and bon appetit.
Bon appetit.
Well, that was fun.
Yeah, kimchi really took us on a ride, didn't it?
It did. It did. From those initial wow, this is a superfood,
right,
to oh, maybe there's more to the story.
Yeah, it's a little more nuanced than we initially thought.
Definitely a lot more nuance. And, I think we did what we set out to do.
Yeah.
We got past those headlines and really understood all those, the complexities of
kimchi. And that's really what it's all about, right? Making those informed decisions.
Right, not just following the trends, but
thinking for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Looking at the evidence.
So who knows? Maybe this will inspire some of you listening to take a deep dive into some of your other favorite foods or food trends or whatever it is.
Yeah, or anything really. Apply that same kind of critical thinking to any information that you come across.
Because the world of food and health, it's always changing.
Always.
Always something new to learn, so.
Speaking of learning, should we wrap up this kimchi adventure?
I think so, yeah. This deep dive's coming to an end, but
it's been a real pleasure, I have to say, unpacking all this with you.
Likewise, I always learn so much from these conversations.
You too.
So, to everyone listening, until our next deep dive adventure, stay curious, keep exploring that fascinating world of food and health.
Yeah, keep asking questions, and remember, the most important ingredient in any healthy diet is a good dose of knowledge.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Happy eating, everyone.